Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Transmission Service and Market Scheduling Priorities Phase 2 Track 1 stakeholder call. Today, we will be reviewing the monthly ATC values for June 2024 and beyond. My name is Isabella Nicosia, representing ISO Stakeholder Affairs. Before we get started, I would like to inform you all that the presentation is available out on the initiative webpage. You can get to that page by going to CRISO.com. On that main landing page, you'll see the Stay Informed tab. If you click on that, you'll see policy initiatives listed there. If you click policy initiatives, that will take you out to our main initiative landing page. And then if you type in the search bar, transmission service and market scheduling priorities, you'll see the phase 2 page pop up. And this presentation will be one of the very first items posted there on that page. Before we get started, just a couple of reminders to go through. This call is being recorded. The recording is for informational and convenience purposes only, so any related transcription should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. And then if you need technical assistance at any point during today's call, you can send a chat to the event producer. If you do have a question, and you're connected to the computer audio, you can raise your hand by selecting the raise hand icon, which is located at the bottom of your screen. If you dialed into the meeting through your phone and are on that phone only line, you'll need to press #2 to raise your hand. And just a reminder for everyone on the line today to please state your name and affiliation before making your comment or asking your question. And then you can also send your question through the chat to all panelists. We'll be monitoring that throughout the call as well. As far as the agenda goes for today, in just a second, I'm going to hand it over to Milos Bosniak to go through the process for establishing wheeling through priority and manual implementation activities. And then we'll hear from Abdul Muhammad Ali, Lixing Jin, Guillermo Bautista Alderete, and Milos again on the monthly ATC numbers for June 2024 through January 2025. And then after that discussion, we'll cover the January request submission window items. So that discussion will be led by Abdul and Milos, and then we'll pass it back to Milos at the end of today's call to go over some next steps. So with that, I will turn things over to Milos and we'll get started.
All right, thank you, Isabella. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Yes. All right, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us again today. I know we just met last week on a related topic, but really appreciate you all sticking with us today. You know, there's a lot of things going on. So today we're going to discuss the resulting available transfer capability, or ATC, values that are calculated on the interties that can be reserved in advance to support establishing wheeling through priority for June 2024 and beyond. Last week on January 8th, I believe, we focused on a discussion on the implementation plan, the milestones, the manual processes we'll be undertaking to start implementation of the approved transmission service and market scheduling priorities initiatives, which includes both the calculation and posting of ATC values, but also the opening of a request window in January to start taking in requests for that ATC to establish that priority for summer and beyond. Today's meeting in particular is focused on those ATC values, how we derive them consistent with the FERC-approved design. We'll also spend a little bit of time talking about our PATH 26 assessment impacts, and then talk through the request submission process and the request window that opens starting tomorrow. I'm going to provide a bit of level setting at the start, just in case folks didn't have a chance to listen into the meeting on January 8th, kind of where we are. That's going to be brief. And then I'll turn it over to our team to walk through the calculation of ATC and some of the associated assessments. We do have 3 hours today, so feel free to ask questions as we go along. We'll also pause at different points to take questions. And like I said at the beginning, we certainly appreciate your patience. And as I offered in the last meeting, please feel free to reach out to us anytime with questions as we launch this initial part of the process manually before the automation becomes available a bit closer to the summer. So getting into the substance on this slide, This is a bit of level setting, but last year on October 30th, FERC approved the proposed new process for establishing wheeling through priority across the ISO system. And that replaces the interim framework that's currently in place and has been in place now for a couple of years. And this new process takes effect on June 1st, 2024, so a bit later this year. This new process relies on the calculation of ATC that can be secured and reserved in advance on our interties to support establishing that wheel-through scheduling priority. The ATC is calculated in monthly periods across a 13-month horizon, as well as a daily period across a 7-day horizon as approved by FERC in that design. And parties can, I think importantly, parties can continue to wheel through the ISO system without reserving ATC. So in other words, the ATC reservation is not a prerequisite to wheel through the ISO system, but those transactions that don't reserve ATC for wheeling through will have a lower market clearing priority to the extent these priorities have to be applied in the market. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Okay. So we're launching this manual implementation process, recognizing that parties around the West are starting to plan for their summer operations, and some of them have contracted or otherwise in the process of contracting for supply. And a factor in these considerations and their plans for serving summer needs may be that the ability to establish that wheel-through priority across the ISO system. So we're starting that manual implementation of this effort this month in January. We've published the monthly ATC values for June and beyond, and the request window, as I mentioned earlier, opens tomorrow. And we're going to review both of these items today. We're going to review the ATC as well as the request process in this January window. The manual process is going to be in effect until functionality becomes available in April, at which point aspects of the ATC calculation and publication of ATC are going to become automated. And then requests will also be submitted via a new tool for both the monthly horizon and the monthly ATC reservation. And then as well, that tool is going to enable the requesting and of daily ATC starting in June. And in last week's call on January 8th, we posted those slides. I didn't replicate the slide here, but in that meeting, we had a couple of slides on what to expect ahead of April when the new functionality is going to be available. But there's going to be a period of market simulation as well as training that's going to be conducted with the new tool. And if all goes well, then in April, the request window will be conducted through that new automation. And ahead of that functionality becoming available, we will also be updating business practice manuals to reflect that new process based on that new automation and utilization of those tools to request ATC and consequently establish that wheel-through scheduling priority. We can go to the next slide, please. So focusing then on the manual aspects of the process, as I mentioned, we're going to be manually calculating, and we are manually calculating ATC across a 13-month horizon, and we posted these values yesterday afternoon for the period of June 2024 through January 2025. And during this period of manual calculation, we're calculating ATC on a subset of interties, and you'll see that today, which are all the import interties on which market participants have established wheel-through priority under the current interim framework that's been in place since summer 2022. We looked at the interties, import interties on which that was requested, and we've effectively used those interties to calculate that ATC during this manual process. We posted those values on the reliability requirements webpage. The link is in the slide in case you need it, but also there was a market notice yesterday that provided the links in case you needed them. And on that reliability requirements page, this is where we store a number of other related documents to this process that I'll cover a bit later towards the end of the presentation to give you a sense of all the different things that have been posted related to this process. So with that, and without further ado, let's shift into, if we can go to the next slide now, into really the purpose of this discussion, which is the ATC values and what those are, and then we'll walk methodically through the different components that ultimately make up that resulting ATC. And for that, I'll turn it over to Abdul to walk us through those different components.
Thank you, Milos, and good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, as Milos said, the section we will talk about the
Abdul, your
animal calculation.
audio is breaking up pretty good.
Oh.
I don't know if maybe turning off your video might help, but if it continues to
Okay.
break up, I'll let you know.
How does it sound now, Isabel?
It's still breaking up. Do you have, if you want to dial into the phone only line, that might help things.
Okay, let me dial in really quick. Did it help with the sound off?
It's a little bit better now.
All right, let me dial in really quick. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. All right. Testing again. This is Abdul.
Yep, we can hear you. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Isabella. Apologies, everyone. All right. So the monthly calculation of ATC, and this is specifically the ATC that we are using for allocating and designating wheel-through priorities through the ATCs, the interties that we identified for this manual process. I'm hearing a little bit of an echo. Is it just on my side?
Go ahead and speak again.
Is this better? All right. I
Yes.
think I disconnected my. All right. Perfect. And then everyone on the panelist, folks, if you can mute, just to make sure, because I'm hearing echo. But if I'm the only one who's hearing it, that's fine. All right. So this is the intent. So if we can go to the next slide, please. All right. So on a high level, what did we do? And we posted the numbers on the liability requirements page, as Milos said. What we did here is we calculated for these target interties that we mentioned last week. These are the interties that we have seen historic wheel-through priority requests, reservations in the past 3 years. During the interim process that we've been going through in the past 3 years, we've been seeing these interties used and requested on. So these are the interties we're targeting in the manual process. Again, once we go live and the tools go live in April, the ATC will be expanded to the full list of interties, and the request will be open to any of those interties. But for the manual process, we focused on these interties that you see in front of you that we've seen historic need on or request on. So what we did, simply the equation, which we talked about in the policy stage and in the tariff, the ATC is based on the TTC, the total transfer capability, minus the ETCOM, which has a few components in there that we're going to talk about later. And then the next one is the CRM. Sorry, I'm hearing that the producers are telling me. Let me disconnect audio completely. All right. Audio disconnected from my computer. Hopefully now it is. All right. Okay, I don't hear the echo either. So, okay, perfect. Sorry about that. All right, thank you. All right, so ETC minus ETCOM minus CRM. And based on that equation, we're going to get into the details. We came up with these numbers. And, you know, I guess maybe I'll pause on these numbers in general. I'll talk about how we calculated them. I'm going to show you the different components that and the numbers that that made up these numbers. But I see a question here, hand raised already, so maybe I'll pause here and take a question. Event producer, if we can unmute Michelle, please.
Would you like unmuted? Who would you like unmuted?
Michelle Keto in the list of the. I see her hand up.
All right, hold on one moment. All right, go ahead.
With the CPUC Energy Division. Hey, Abdul, just a couple of questions. So I just want to clarify that at Malin, that does not include the transmission ownership by Pacific Core and PowerX, which they can release quarterly, 750 megawatts. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And then I just want to clarify that with regard to Tracy COTP and Tracy PG&E, I see that you have, 3,200 megawatts, and the MIC for those is really more like 300 or 700. Is that right?
The numbers you're seeing actually is the mix of those. So what we're gonna do when we get those requests, we're gonna add up those requests to make sure that they're not exceeding the total amount on those interties. But these are, the numbers you're seeing are shared numbers between the two interties.
But Abdul, I'm looking at, that's the total transfer capability, but the MIC on COTP Tracy is 765.
We're not looking at MIC in this process, Michelle. This process is purely based on the equation you're seeing in front of you, which is TTC minus ETCOM, which I'm going to talk about what is that, and minus the TRM. MIC is not part of this process.
Okay, so then I just want to clarify that Tracy COTP and Tracy PG&E as well as Tesla 230, that's all north of Path 26, is that right?
That is my understanding, correct.
Okay, so when you guys do your analysis later on, you use 800 and 1200, but if we actually had available transmission capability in these amounts going to Palo Verde, my assessment is 3,100 plus 3,200 plus 914 plus Malin. So 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 of available transmission capability that could enter these points and go anywhere across the system. Am I reading that correctly?
We're going to talk into the assessment that we did later in a later part of the slide. So why don't we hold off to that point if that's okay with you?
Yeah, but just to confirm, I'm sure Guillermo can confirm this. If you actually allowed people to wheel from these locations to wherever they wanted to, I can just look at this and see that they would exceed Path 26. It's only 4,000 north to south. Is that right?
Again, we have Lee Cheng with us. He's going to talk about the assessment on Path 26. So I'll give this for expertise when we get to it.
Just one more question. So the deliverability of resources within California depends on the maximum import capability, right? And you guys have been you've been very concerned about the maximum import capability. But if we allowed 3,000, 6,000, 7,000 megawatts at Tracy, don't you think that would affect the deliverability of resources within California?
I think, Michelle, that I think we discussed the MIC and the TTC, if I remember, a lot in the policy stage. And the conclusion is that we're gonna calculate ATC and we're gonna allow up to this amount based on this equation, this process for wheel-throughs. I think that discussion, I don't think I want to open that discussion again in this implementation presentation here, unless we also want to talk about it. I think for this presentation today, we're specifically talking about implementing an approved policy, approved tariff, and we're following that process.
Yeah,
think we-
yes,
we're
sorry,
looking
I
for
totally understand that,
Yeah.
Abdul, but you also indicated that you were going to be concerned about path 26 congestion, and looking at that, and you're only setting 800 megawatts and making available transmission capability in the north that well exceeds the north to south transmission. I don't see how that's feasible, and so I'm not sure we're setting this up. Okay,
Yeah,
I will
Michelle, this
bring
is-
this up in the path 26 discussion.
Yeah, bring it up there because the
We have details.
different paths have different impacts on path 26, and leaching is going to be able to talk through her assessment and to what extent do any of these paths, simply because they're in the north doesn't mean necessarily there's a one-to-one impact on path 26. So she's going to walk through her assessment.
Yeah, well, except that if you allow people, if this is only an assessment of the import leg and not the export leg, and they can, everyone's sunk at Meade or Palo Verde, then, I mean, it's not too far of a stretch to imagine where they would go. I would also note that there's a similar concern with Sillamar, which, has I think here you have, 2,000 megawatts of available transfer capability, but the MIC is only 600 megawatts. I guess I have to look at it, but I guess I'm a little shocked seeing these numbers. But I guess we'll talk about it a little bit later. So thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, and I would invite folks to look at the posted historic wheel-through transactions on the reliability requirements page. You can see there that in the last 2 years, we had 0 requests on Silmar, a little bit over 100 megawatts on these interties in discussion, the Tesla Tracy and the 2 Tracy interties. So, very minimal use, however, noted, Michelle, and I think, yeah, we'll talk in details in the next slide about the path 26 impact. And similarly, I think, maybe really to put everyone to understanding, we're going to talk about the ATC calculations right now and how we did them based on the approved policy, approved tariff. If folks have concerns about how we did them, I think that's definitely a good place to bring it up here. And then next, we're going to talk about the path 26 impacts on and how we did the assessment. And then we're going to talk about the calculation, the manual requesting process. So just to give you the full thread of what we're going to do today. So maybe we, after I go over a section, maybe we can ask questions about that section. That would make things perhaps more efficient. Thank you. Yeah. So looks like we have a couple of questions, hopefully about this specific or prior slides. Presenter, if we can unmute Carrie, please.
Hi, this is Carrie Bentley with the Western Power Trading Forum. I think this is the right slide. If not, please tell me to go somewhere else. And maybe you answered this for Michelle too already about Malin, and I missed it. But at the last MPPF, they presented how the transmission exchange agreement is expiring, and the ISO is going to lose 1,200 megawatts of transfer capability at Malin. And so I was wondering if these numbers were inclusive of that transfer capability loss and how that works its way through this calculation.
I'm not familiar with the call you're talking about, Carrie, but we did the Malin numbers you see here do reflect a recent derate on the path. That there's some work being done right now to kind of fix those issues. I'm not sure how much detail I can get into in this call, but there is some curtailments on the tie that we're aware of, and there's work being done to fix that curtailment. And those numbers reflect these curtailments and the outages that are associated with them.
So this is the Market Performance and Planning Forum call, the MPPF that Guillermo's group leads. And I'm not sure if it's the same outage that you're talking about. This was specifically about the TEA, the Transmission Exchange Agreement that was expiring. And so basically a portion of the line was going to move to Bank BAA and the ISO was losing 1,200 megawatts. So that sounds a little different than the outage issue, but maybe I'm wrong and it's the same.
Yeah, and this is Milos. I know Guillermo may still be with us, but I think he had to step away and go pick up his daughter, so he may not be hearing us. But I think on the next slide we'll get to the OTC, and on Malin, what you'll see is it accounts for the re-rate and the transmission capacity that's been in effect since last summer. It does not include any assumptions at this point in time of reductions as a result of the loss of or potential expiration of the TEA. You know, those discussions may still be ongoing about the TEA, and we have not made any assumptions yet about that expiration. So it reflects, as you'll see on the next slide, a re-rate plus active known submitted planned outages on Malin. If there is that ultimate expiration and that agreement is not renegotiated, then I think there would be additional potential reductions whenever that expiration date is. But in our operations, we have not yet accounted for any kind of reduction of 1,200 megawatts as a result of the TA expiration.
Okay, very helpful. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. And yeah, in the next slides, we'll talk about those components, the OTC, the native load calculation, ETC. So we'll see those in there in detail, hopefully in the next few slides. One more caller to go through, please, producer.
Hi, this is Steve Keen from Edison. I want to ask about the two Tracy things there. I'm trying to compare them to what's shown on the calculation of MIC, and they show the OTC megawatts there. And
Steve, I'm sorry, I lost you there for a second. I don't know if it's me or someone else. You can repeat what you said. I'm sorry.
Yeah, in the MIC calculations for when they show that, they show what the OTC is, and they treat those two the same, and they put them at a capacity of 3846. Yet you're showing them here on, for January of 25 at, 52 for each. What is there some relationship between them and the Tracy TEA? Maybe I just don't understand enough about the way the transmission is labeled and dealt with.
I'm not sure of what the tie is with the Tracy TA is, Steve, but the way the MIC process does their calculation and the way we're doing it, they're quite different. So, and we don't have, the MIC speeds here on the call, that at least says initial MIC calculation. So I can't answer for how that's being done, but what we're explaining today is how we're doing it for the purpose of the wheeling reservation process.
Okay, but my question concerns, I thought the OTC, I'm assuming that would be roughly the same as the TTC. It's the amount that can be transferred through there. And I'm seeing, like I said, the combined number for those two is 3846. And yet you're showing it, each of them being more than that. So.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is Milos. Let me just jump in. So thanks for the question, Steve. On the next slide, we'll get to the OTCs and the TTCs.
This is the total.
Yeah.
For the two. Milos,
on the next slide, we'll get to the. Go ahead, Abdul.
Yeah, the numbers you're seeing is, I think I mentioned at the beginning. The numbers on these two ties is shared. the way they are treated in our systems, they're separate ties. You can request wheels through them separately, but this is an aggregated number for each of them for both of them that we're putting them separately. But the way we're going to do the calculation when we do a validation of the wheels, it will ensure we don't exceed total capability of both of these inner ties together. And I don't know, Milos, if that's what you're going to say, or you have something to add.
Yeah, that's it. And these are part of a branch group, the Tracy points, and so the aggregate reservations should not exceed the ATC or you'll see when we go through the different components of Tracy on the next slide. We'll go through the TTC component, we'll go through the ETC and TRM component, so they will be treated as a singular branch group. The reason we called them out here is because we did receive in the past some small amounts of wheel-through requests across these 2 points separate from each other. So we accounted for them here, but they are a branch group. And I do want to note as well, before we move on to the next slide, that I do recognize that the numbers here, as you're looking at the different tie points, may look, larger, but keep in mind as well that the volume of priority wheel-through requests across the prior years did not come anywhere close to any of these volumes. There's small amounts on these different ties, whereas the primary points were Malin and Knob, where the largest volumes are. So we don't expect anywhere near these numbers priority wheel-through requests going forward, and we'll be monitoring for that as we go through this process. But I'll turn it over back to you, Abdul, if you want to move on to the next slide, as it seems folks are asking questions kind of for the different components, or if there's anything else you want to note here.
I should note, I think for you, Steve, and everyone, I looked quickly on the mixed stuff. So these two, the Tracy Kotzebue and the Tracy PG&E, these two scheduling points are part of the Tracy 500 ITC. That's what you probably see on the mixed side, a Tracy 500 ITC, which is a combination of these. So the naming and how the CAISO does the mapping between branch groups and scheduling points, they're a little bit different, in some scenarios. So what we're using here in the wheeling process, scheduling points that people are going to wheel through, they're going to request priority wheels to come into the CAISO and exit. But the mixed process is more looking at branch groups, which could be a combination of more than one scheduling point. That's why I suggest to you and the other calls not to put the two together, to make in this process, because they're different processes with different approaches, with different intents from them in the outcome. Hopefully that helps, Steve.
Yep, thank you. I'll wait and see as you go through the next slides.
Thank you. Okay. So now this is the calculation of TTC, which includes rates caused by planned outages that we have and aware of right now. As of to the moment of the calculation of these numbers, we looked at all the planned outages that we have for this target period from June of this year till January of next year. And we looked at the planned outages that are impacting these inner ties. And based on those outage derates, we derated TTC as needed. And that's what resulted in OTC, the operating transfer capability. So that's where we're at right now with these numbers. We, as you can see, a lot of the inner ties, don't have any impact. Some of them do, and therefore that caused the derate to their TTC value. And that's the starting point of this equation that we looked at. For ATC, we started with these numbers. They could be just the original TTC values, or they could be a derated TTC that we call OTC, which is the starting. That's what we use for the starting point. So these are based on the up-to-date analysis of the planned outages that we have for that target period. And then if we can go to the next slide, please. The next component is existing transmission commitments, or as we call it in the TRF, ETCOM. These are also part of the equation of the calculation, and they consist of three main components. So the first component is the ETC and TOR commitments that we have in our systems and recognized in the market. So these are, we're starting by kind of reserving for those or protecting for those in this calculation. This is based on the latest data and what we have right now. So if to Michelle's question earlier, someone hasn't released something yet, then it's not reflected here. If things get released, then in the next iteration, you'll see those numbers reflected accordingly. And then the wheel through priority, the wheel through priority reservations, we, whenever we come up with awards, so in this process, we're posting ATC, and then we are opening a period for requests for priority, wheel through priority requests, and then we're granting awards at the end of that calculation. Those awards that we're calculating, we're putting back into the equation, into the ATC, future ATC calculation, to ensure we don't award for those again, to make sure that we're reducing ATC by the amount that has been awarded historically. For the first run that you're seeing in front of you, there are no wheel through awards yet, so there's nothing in the calculation that reflects that. And the last component, the native load calculation, this is the amount that we are reserving for the CAISO BAA to be able to serve its load. Based on the methodology we came up with in the policy, that calculation is looking at the historic shown RA import plus historic non-RA imports, basically contracted imports that are serving the LSC's need in the California ISO BAA, but not shown to the CAISO. And then the last one is the accounting for load growth from prior years to the upcoming years that we're calculating, or months that we're calculating ATC for. For the historic RA imports, we use the data that we have in our systems, that based on the data that was shown to us in the last 2 years or the prior 2 months of data. So we looked at last 2 years for the target month. We looked at the data between the prior 2 years for that target month. So if we're targeting June of this year, we looked at June of last year and June of the year before, and then we grabbed the higher of the two for each intertype. For the contracted non-RA imports, we requested, or we asked the LSCs to submit those to us in the past few weeks. Those came in by January 8th. We had a deadline for them, so they came in by January 8th, and we received the non-RA historic imports that the LSCs used to serve their load. We also, followed the same methodology of the higher of the 2 years to come up with these numbers, and we added it to the native load component. And then we also asked for new contracts for the upcoming for that target period, June through January, that if there's any new contracts that have been executed by our non-RA that are not shown to the CAISO, that's also accounted part of the native load numbers. And then the final component is the load growth. The load growth is basically we looked at the prior 2 years CEC forecast for each month for those target months, and then we compared it with the upcoming CEC forecast for the month, and then we grabbed the higher difference of the two, and that total is what we're calling load growth. And then based on that number, we calculated how much of it we expected to be reflected by imports, based again on historic total RA versus historic total imports. That gave us a ratio of what we expect the imports to account for this load growth. And that's what we use for the load growth component. So for June of this year, we looked at the CEC forecast for June of this year, and we compared it with the CEC forecast for June of last year and the year before, 2023 and 2022. And we, out of the prior 2 years, we looked at the lower value, which gives us the higher difference between next year's or this year's data and the prior years. And that gave us the total load growth, expected load growth. And then we divided it or allocated it to the import portion, and then from there to all the enterprise that we're targeting in the process. And that's how we calculated the load growth component. You put all of these together, you end up with a native load component, how much we expect we need on the enterprise to serve our load in the California ISO Balancing Authority area. So that's the ATC numbers. Let me go to the next slide, please. And then, so with that being said, that's the ETC COM. And, like I said, so the ETC COM, first part is ETCs and TORs, and this is that number. These are mostly static numbers. Sometimes you see them varying, like here you see for Mellon, it's varying monthly because some of those contracts do have clause and terms to be curtailed based on the outage D rate. So they would be impacted by an OTC number. So if we get an OTC number that is lower than TTC, that could impact those ETC contracts that we have based on the formula that comes with them. So we use that to come up with a monthly ETC kind of trend or equation for these months to reflect the outage D rates on the contract. All right, so that's that one. And then we can go to the next slide, please. I think I'll go through all of them and then we'll pause for questions so people have the full picture. Now for the native load component, these are the numbers we came up with. Again, the native load was based on historic RA, historic non-RA, and the load growth component. As you can see, some of those enterprise, the first three had no historic RA or no, native load component, therefore. But, for the most part, the other enterprise had load growth, and some of them are significant. Not load growth, sorry, native load component. So these were accounted for, and probably one of the main reasons that, that you see a significant reduction in ATC on some of these enterprise. Next slide, please. All right. The TRM, the transmission reliability margin, this is basically, it's a percentage that the CAISO is setting aside for different types of uncertainties. And these are consistent with the NERC standard, the mod 008-1. So these are kind of standardized types of criteria that we use for the TRM calculation. For the purpose, and then I think we posted the new ATC and TRM documents. You can see the details there of what these components are and this NERC standard. But for the purpose of calculating it for this ATC calculation, we ended up, the number we came up with, the percentage is 6% for TRM, 6% of TTC. That's the number we ended up using, which is based on 3% for uncertainty, forecast uncertainty in the transmission topology, which is accounting for the risk of forced outages on the enterprise, and has the ability to account for limitations on Path 26, which we're going to talk about in more details in the following section. So this is the first 3%, and the next 3% is for variation in generation dispatch, and these are looking for any unavailability of supply during peak loads, looking at some of the historic numbers, and I think Guillermo has some discussions on that. But before I get into TRM numbers in the next slide, let me pause here for Milos. I think you wanted maybe to add some stuff here in the TRM numbers, or are we good to go?
Yeah, no, thanks, Abdul. Yeah, so I do briefly just want to touch on these these couple of components. So those that the first component is associated with that forecast uncertainty and transmission topology, and we've set that at 3%. Again, this accounts for uncertainty associated with the risk of forced outages that the transmission provider can't foresee, and therefore the TRM reduces the ATC to account for a level of this uncertainty. The TRM, this component of the TRM, to the extent there are significant limitations on the internal transmission system, primarily Path 26, which we know supports wheels through the system, particularly sourcing from Malin, that TRM could be increased to account for the fact that the internal system may not be able to support a volume of wheels due to limitations on it, outages, other limitations, re-rates. And to the extent that we do have some of these limitations, that TRM would be increased on Malin, since we don't calculate ATC on the internal Path 26. So this would be an impact on those paths that are impacted on thties impacted by those Path 26 reductions. The second component of the TRM is the 3% for variation in generation dispatch that accounts for the unavailability of supply during peak periods of the day, and particularly during net load peak periods when solar resources and other resources, renewables, become unavailable. At that point, we know that historically the ISO relies on internal supply and imports to manage that unavailability. And there's a number of factors that ultimately impact the level of reliance on imports and internal resources during those periods. There may be outages, other things that are going on the system, but one of them is the unavailability of solar and renewable supply in those periods. And that 3% then we think represents a reasonable range of incremental imports above RA and non-RA contracted historical volumes across tie points that have historically supported imports into the ISO in these periods. We have the ability as well on this element to increase that TRM to the extent there's other uncertainty that is materializing on the grid, such as, if we have a low hydro year, in addition to the unavailability of solar and other resources in peak periods, a low hydro year may impact the unavailability of hydro resources. And there is the ability to, again, increase that TRM if necessary across different periods of the year. But again, at this starting point, we're starting with 6%. And as we move along in the calculation of ATC across the year, there's the ability to vary that as necessary. And as you get closer into depending on what you're setting that aside, if you're setting that aside for Path 26 limitations, an incremental amount, if those limitations ultimately get canceled or removed, there's the ability always to put that capacity back into the ATC. But the starting point here is 6%. And I'll talk later when we get to some of the documents that we've posted. They provide a bit more detail on these and acknowledge the ability to vary these and increase them as necessary if the uncertainty changes. But I'll turn it over back to you, Abdul, and you can show kind of what the numbers look like.
Thank you, Miloš. Yeah, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. Yeah, so these are the TRMs that we came up with. Pretty, straightforward, 6% of TTC. So, static for the most part, sometimes varies by season if TTC varies by season. So that's what you're seeing here in front of you, total TRM that we're using as of now based on 6%. That's 6% of TTC. And okay, I think that's the last of this section. Can we go to the next slide so I can confirm? I think yeah, this is the last of this section. So before we go to the Path 26 study, let me pause for questions. Producer, if we can go to the first caller, please.
Hey, this is Michelle from the Energy Division again. I just want to go back to the Tracy COTP and Tracy PG&E. Are those additive? Because they appear to be referencing the same line. So are you talking about 3,000 per for both areas? Or are you talking
Okay.
about 6,000?
Yes. 3,862 for both.
No. But if you go back up to the available transfer capability, I'm trying to understand if those are combined or separate. Right?
The
Because
numbers are for both of these. Can we go to the slide Michelle was referencing? I think it's the first slide in this section. A little bit
First-
more, please.
yeah. So
There you go.
you know, they have the same total transfer capability. They have the same. So I'm trying to understand, are these, could you get 3292 at Tracy COTP and 3084 at Tracy PG&E in September for a total of 62 something? Or are these the
Yeah,
same line?
These. Sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry, that was my question.
Oh, Michelle. Oh, there it is. Okay. These. So the TTCs, the TTC numbers are for both of them combined. So what you're seeing here is the ATC for each of the energizers. We're going to use the more restrictive, the more limiting number to calculate wheels for both of these energizers. So let's go with the first column for June. Tracy Cotby is 3283. Tracy PG&E is 3054. The more limiting is 3054. For wheels that are coming on both of these, the total wheels are coming on both of these scheduling points will be limited for June at 3054.
Okay, that's a good
Does that help,
clarification.
that example?
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Thank you. Next caller, please, Steve. Can we go to the next caller, please?
Hi. Yeah, this is Steve Keen from Southern California Edison. On the one showing the historic, the native load set aside, most of the native load set asides are consistent across the whole 7-month period. They go up and down a little, but not too much. But the Malin 500 really drops off as we get to winter. I just want to confirm that that's right and see, like, if you check to make sure that that's correct. And if you know, is it really a seasonal thing?
It is correct. Probably a seasonal thing. I think we look at aggregated, RA showings all the time, and we see a significant increase in imports over the summer months. So the change in the numbers makes sense, and it is correct. I can go back after the meeting and triple check everything, but the numbers should be correct.
Okay, thank you.
And if I can add, Steve, if you look at the progression of the calculation, those numbers are affected by a number of things. They're affected by the native load. The resulting ATC is a factor of a number of things, including outages and the native load component. But as Abdul said, is what we've seen, maybe if you can go back a couple of slides to the actual native load slide, and we just focus on Malin, you can see kind of and I think we've seen this in the even when we looked at the policy, we looked at a few years back, that particularly Malin and Knob, as you get into outside of the summer months, the imports that are contracted are fairly low. And once you get to the summer months, they progressively increase as you get closer to September, starting with June, and then you'll see increases all the way with September being the highest. And what this means is this is the amount of transmission capacity set aside for native load, which, along with the other factors, the TRM, the accounting for any known outages, ultimately has the effect of reducing the ATC that's available for reservation in advance. Keep in mind that the resulting ATC numbers don't necessarily reflect what the market, once you get into the day-ahead market and real-time market, what the market has available to optimize. This is kind of a reservation base, what you can reserve in advance ahead of the market running. The market is not going to have 0 megawatts to optimize in September or Malin, for example, or some of these lower values. Hopefully that helps.
It does. Thank you.
And to that point, I think maybe I should clarify for the native load calculation, what we're presented is this is purely based on the monthly process and how we did it, right now manually looking in advance. Now, when we get into the month ahead, in the month ahead calculation, we will use actual shown RA capacity to calculate native load as we talked in the policy. So, if things change, it will get reflected in the month ahead to kind of reflect the latest numbers. So yeah, that's it. If there's no more questions, I think that's it for this section, and we can go to the next section with Lee Ching.
Yeah. And before Lee Ching jumps on, let me just introduce this element and put it in context. So what we said in the policy design and that FERC ultimately approved is that ahead of calculating and publishing the summer numbers, or in conjunction with that, we're going to be doing an assessment on the resulting ATC numbers to really stress, particularly past 26, through an assessment. And in this case, as Lee Ching will talk about, we ran a sensitivity power flow analysis by our operations team, but really to stress the internal system, particularly past 26, to test what's the volume of wheel throughs that it could support, or are there any reliability impacts at different levels of potential wheel throughs across the system. So I'll turn it to Lee Ching to walk you through the next few slides on what that assessment looked like and hopefully answer some of the questions that were raised at the beginning as well. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Hi, this is Lee Ching. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Okay, sounds good. So next, I would like to talk about our power flow-based analysis of the impact the reading through on the past 26. So the presentation, first we will go through the past 26 historical flow. We can review the last summer, what we have on past 26 without the reading through concept. Then we will take a look at the study assumptions, including the maximum PWT ATCs for the summer 2024. Abdul has walked you guys through the detailed numbers for the coming summer. In our assessment, we actually look at much more conservative data on the past 26 operation. We actually look at the PWT ATC value much higher than what we have currently showed in Abdul's calculated sheet. Then we will go through the past 26 power flow analysis results. At the end, we will share the conclusion with the team. Next slide, please. This is pie trending for the past 26 flow during the summer from June 1st to the end of September 2023. We even look at the previous 2022-2021 flow pattern. It's very similar. As you can see, the past 26 flow, we have north to south and south to north. The top limit is 4,000. It's north to south. Positive value means the north to south flow, and sometimes we have south to north flow, which shows as a negative value, and the limit here is negative 3,000. So basically, the range is from 3,000 south to north to the 4,000 north to south flow. As you can see, based on the flow pattern, we don't have any flow exceeding the 4,000 in the summer 2023. So next slide, please. due to the next slide, I will talk about, the study assumption. So basically, PAS 26 is one of the major paths in the California ISO BA. It's an internal path, therefore there's no schedule, no ETCC. However, the interchange, the scheduling, majority of the scheduling points has some impact on PAS 26 flow. We just pick a pair, of the wheel through, which has a major impact on PAS 26. The source, wheel through source, we picked as a marine in our study. Basically, it's from BPA. And the wheel through sink is the APS, from the scheduling point is PV West. So if we take this source and sink, the schedule flow has a major impact on PAS 26 north to south. It will increase the PAS 26 north to south significantly. At the same time, we look at the historical data. As I mentioned, we look at the time window June 1st to September 30th. We find one of the highest daily peak flow is 3850. One day we have 3850 from north to south. And we did a detailed analysis for this scenario. At the same time, we also noticed a majority, like 90 days during this period, 90 days flow north to south, the daily peak is less than 3,000. We also did a detailed analysis, at the flow level, 3,000 PAS 26 to see how much wheeling through we can take from lean to PV West. Because based on those data, we also reviewed the ATC, the PWT ATC value, so after he generated. So based on that data, we came up with some study assumption. One scenario is at very high PAS 26, north to south flow 3850. And at that level, we did a study for 800 megawatt wheel through from lean to PV West. The second scenario we look at is PAS 26 at 3,000. Majority of the days we have the flow less than 3,000 from north to south. And in that scenario, we actually looked into the ATC, the wheel through is all the way through the 1270 megawatt from lean to PV West. Next slide, please.
Hey, Li-Cheng, if you don't mind, we have a question on one of the previous slides from Michelle in the queue.
Okay, let's go back to the previous slide so we can take a look at it.
So with regard to the 2022 summer path flows, wasn't path 26 derated though? And isn't it relevant what the rating of the path is?
Okay, that's a very good question. Yes, 2023, we PAS 26 because PG&E, the 500 kV lines derate. PAS 26 did get derated. That's why we and compare with previous years. Previous years, PAS 26, based on our operation experience, although the WAC pass rating is 4,000, but I think in the past we had experience real time actually can go all the way above to 4,700, 4,800. The path because we operate based on contingency and the flow limits. But 2023 in the past summer, due to derate on the line, we did notice the reduction of the transmission capacity on the PAS 26. But at the same time, we also redesigned the rods on the PAS 26. Therefore, really PAS 26 is good to operate 4,000. That part has been validated by our team. And as you can tell from the historical data, in the past summer, actually the highest daily peak is 3850. Does this answer your question?
Right, but if this is to show that there was no congestion because it was 4,000, we did in fact have congestion because it was derated in July of 2023, right? On the 20th or maybe the 25th, is that right?
You mean congestion? Oh, okay. Is your question related to the congestion this summer?
Yeah, so I mean, you say, look, we're not exceeding the limit, but if you don't actually share the limit, then you can't see the congestion. Like, let's just say that because of a fire, the path is derated to 2,000. Well, in that case, there's congestion you draw a line right through that and there's congestion every day. So this is only relevant when you show it compared to what can flow, right? That's how you would see congestion. That's my concern here.
That's a good question. This picture really showed you in the past. Those are coming the data from the SCADA real-time data. In the past summer, what past 26 flow we have. It could happen, for some days, maybe we only have 2,000 due to the fire, whatever risk. We derive past 26 to 2,000. Maybe the system has congestion. Then that's why past 26 flow is limited to 2,000. It's possible. But but for us, in order for us to perform analysis, we just show you what we have. Even with the system, we have congestion means we have resource to mitigate, right? So we just dispatch different resource to maintain past 26 at a good flow level.
Okay. Well, just if you're showing this in the future to try to see that there's not path 26 issues, it would be helpful to show what the path what can flow across the path. That's all. Thanks.
Okay, sounds good. So now let's focus on the scenario one. As I mentioned, in the summer when we perform study, we really look at what flow we have on that path, and what's the impact for future operation. So we picked the highest flow on that path, 3850, in our base case. And then we start to apply the wheel through from BPA, from the wheeling through from Malin to PWS. We stress the path for 800 megawatts. This has a big impact on path 26 north to south flow. The base case flow is around like 4,500 megawatts. What does that mean? If we continue, when we have base case 3850 itself, it's a very high base flow on the path 26. If we continue stressing, let's say we apply 1,200 megawatt wheel through, we may lead to post-contingency instability. But in our study, we apply 800 megawatt, and the post-contingency flow reach around 4,500. And then to protect, in case of losing Midway, Winston, the number 1, number 2 line, for those M-2 lines, all the flow shifted to the remaining line, and we observe it's around like 116% overload on the path. So which means if in real life, if today we have a very high path 26 north to south flow, and we'd like to schedule 800 megawatt wheel through from the Malin to PWS system, we will observe congestion, and because it's the constraint is being activated in the market, has been activated in the market all the time. So basically, the market will go through the congestion management process to curtail, to maintain path 26 at a reasonable level. So, but being said is even without this reading through, we activated the control points in the market. We rely on the market congestion management to manage the path 26 flow. But based on this analysis, you can have a rough idea about how much impact of the wheel through on the path 26 with a very high base case flow to start with. Any question before we move to the next scenario study analysis?
Oh, we have a hand raised from Michelle Keto.
Hey, Michelle Keto from CPUC Energy Division. Just another question. So you're using 800, but as I noted before, you're allowing available transmission capability of 3,000 at Tracy. So wouldn't a more stress system be closer to 3,000 megawatts of wheels, since that's the amount that you're allowing at that location? And Tracy is north of path 26, right?
For this, Tracy, the wheeling through, we didn't, all the feedback we heard from is about the Malin, the impact of Malin wheeling through. So our analysis focused on the Malin, and also in our study, Malin to PWS, that pair, scheduling pair has like based on sensitivity study, it has a major impact on passenger 6. We really didn't look into the impact of Tracy readings loop.
Right.
1,000. I'm not sure how the Tracy 3,000 the schedule. Tracy is although it's a scheduling point, but it's also within the ISO-BA. So
Yeah, but you're making that available for wheel throughs, and you're trying to test the system, and you said I can take 3,000 megawatts of wheel at Tracy, then you're not exactly testing the system. I understand historically that's what you see is Malin to PV, but since you just made that available, I'm just saying that this assessment isn't really assessing your ability to simultaneously deliver these points, right? Which you've made available.
you are correct. In our testing, we didn't test simultaneously testing all the the scheduling impact on passenger 6. We just specifically look at the impact of the Malin to the PV West, the synchronous source impact on passenger 6.
Right, but you also didn't test these
By the way,
individually. Okay, well,
Michelle.
I'm just concerned that it's not necessarily a test of the ability of CAISO to take in 3,000 megawatts at Tracy for high priority wheels. So if you don't think you can do 3,000, then it doesn't make sense to make that available. That's all I'm saying. Thanks.
Thank you.
And Michelle and Lichinger, I mean, keep in mind, again, I mean, it's very important and useful to look at the historic numbers that we've seen on the wheel requests that we've been seeing. So we're trying to assess realistic scenarios in this assessment, conservative realistic scenarios. The Tracy interties you're talking about, Michelle, we have not, a little bit over 100 in the past 3 years. 105 is the highest we've seen over the past few years. So keep in mind, we're trying to do sensitivities on, risky, scenarios that we think it's worth checking on.
Thank you, Abdul.
Okay, we have a hand from Doug.
Doug Boccignone for the Bay Area Municipal Transmission Group. Thanks for this analysis. So is the takeaway, I know you tested this with these assumptions and you show you could have some issues if the incremental flows were 800 megawatts or some amount less, since it's a 16% overload. But it looks to me like you didn't make any adjustments based on that. Is the takeaway that you're comfortable that the market redispatch would be sufficient to address any issues if they were to occur?
Yes, I did. We didn't do any adjustment because the wheeling through essentially goes to the market. It has a different priority. If really in real time they schedule interchange on those scheduling points, so we will leave the market. The market will start to see the congestion before we reach 30-50 together with 800. On that scenario, as you can see, if we leave it as is, it will end up with the 16% overload, 116% overload comparing to 30 minutes emergency rating. But because we have already enforced the constraint in the market, so the congestion actually will happen before we reach there. But we just would like to show you where we are and how we are going to handle it.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. I mean, I think Michelle mentioned this earlier, but I just wanted to reiterate. I mean, we hold internal generators to a higher standard for deliverability. And I know this isn't exactly the same thing as the deliverability studies that are done, but there's similarities. So I think it's worth thinking about, why we require, have more stringent requirements for deliverability for internal resources to ISO load than we do for wheels.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, we definitely can provide this feedback to our planning deliverability study. But being said, with what we have, you know, in operation, what resource we have, and the process we have based on our study, this is the results, and that's the way, you know, we already have existing procedure to take care of those thermal overload.
Thank you.
Let's go to next slide if we don't have any other questions. Okay, the scenario 2 actually is it gives a much more comfortable feeling. As I mentioned, 90 days among the 3 months of the summer, from June 1st to September, almost 4 months of the summer, we have the Passenger 6 north to south flow level, the flow level around like 3,000, less than 3,000 megawatts. So in this case, we tested, we applied the wheel through value. Actually, we tested 1271 megawatt wheel through from BPA to APS. This is higher than the previous scenario. The post contingency flow on the Passenger 6, you know, for the loss of the -2 is reaching 2891 amps. Our 30 minutes emergency rating is 2964. So what does that mean? That means, you know, if in our real time, our Passenger 6 flow around like 3,000 megawatt, we can handle around 1,300 wheel through without congestion. So that's just give you some idea with regarding how much room we have when we Passenger 6 flow is around 3,000. You know, how much room we have for the wheel through if they would like to use the capacity. So under this scenario, you know, really we don't need it. We don't expect any overload or market congestion to handle the Passenger 6. Any question before we move on to the conclusion slide? Okay, now let's take a look at the next slide. So I'd like to briefly talk about the conclusion. Means first one, based on assessment, really when Passenger 6 north to south flow is below 3,000, there's no reliability concern to apply near 1,300 megawatt on the wheel from the BPA to APS. This is a very big number for the summer season compared with what Abdul's manual calculation. So we have enough room to manage those wheel through. Then if Passenger 6 north to south flow is above 3,000, when we apply actual wheel through, we may experience potential post-contingency thermal overload. Depending on how much base case flow on Passenger 6 and how much wheel through we have, we may experience some sort of the market congestion. And that potential thermal overload is protected by the procedure 6410 control point 1. This has been there for years. So being said is we have some mechanism in place to take care if there's any, the congestion on that path due to the wheel through together with the high Passenger 6 flow. That's all I have for the sensitive power flow based Passenger 6 study. Feel free to let us know if you have any question, and we will be here to help. Thank you.
Thank you, Li-Ching. Let me just give it a second here, see if anybody has any more questions on this portion, but really appreciate you walking through that. Okay, if not, let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so shifting now from the ATC calculation portion, and again, those numbers are posted on our website. You can see that. They'll be there throughout the request window as you're making requests. Now we're going to move to the actual request window. We teed this up at the meeting on January 8th. So some of this may be a bit of a repeat of that information, but we wanted to just share a bit more information on the request submission. We posted a couple of documents that facilitate request submission. So we'll walk through that as well. So if you don't mind, let's go to the next slide and we'll tag team it here between Abdul and myself. I'll start here just to note again that the request window for monthly wheeling through priority based on the monthly ATC numbers that we posted opens on January 18th, and it's going to be in effect through January 31st. And what that means is that you can submit requests anytime within these windows. You don't have to do it on the first day, but you can do it anytime within these 2 weeks. We're going to evaluate these requests as if they had been received simultaneously under the approved tariff process, and that's laid out in Section 23 of the tariff. The requests for that monthly ATC cover that period that ATC is available and posted, which is June 2024 through January 2025. And then as we open subsequent windows, I think it will also be June 2024, and you can add another month to the end of that. So February, March, as we open different windows until we get to June. But the results of once you submit these requests, we're going to evaluate them, and we'll talk about that in subsequent slides. But we'll communicate then the results to scheduling coordinators that have submitted these requests within 3 business days of the window closing as provided in the tariff, which means by February 5th, we'll provide a communication to those that have submitted the request, whether you got it, what you got, or if you did not get the ATC. So let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, here I'll turn it over to Abdul to walk you through what that request information looks like. We're going to be processing these manually, and both Abdul and I, so it will take us a bit of time, but this is the information he's going to walk through that we're going to be requesting for the ATC.
Right. Thanks, Milos. And actually, let me pause here, Carrie. I see Carrie's hand up. Maybe it's about the previous slide. Producer, if we can take that call, please.
Hey, thanks, Abdul. I think it was about the previous slides. This is Carrie Bentley with the Western Power Trading Forum. Catalin mentioned that, Milos mentioned that you were going to reply within 3 business days. I'm wondering if you consider WPTF's prior request to make this transparent to the market at some point in time. And we didn't expect it within 3 business days, but just some historical tracking.
Yeah, this is Milos. I think we can consider it a bit more. I think the concern would be just pointing out who's got the capacity. I think we certainly can post how much ATC maybe was reserved across what ties. I think, if I remember correctly, I think there was a request. I think we could post the same information that we're posting today, which is the awarded wheel-through priority in aggregate by month across the tie points, similar to what we have on our website. Is that what you're referring to, Carrie? And she might be muted. You might want to unmute her.
Hi, thanks, Milos. Yes, I did accidentally mute myself. Yes, that's what I was referring to, and that would be really helpful to post going forward.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, well, we may not be able to do it right by February 5th, but I think certainly we can create that simplified tracking document and post it on our website soon after that window, and I'll take that on.
Great, thanks so much.
Thanks, Milos. By the way, we're planning to post aggregated data once the tools go live, so that's coming. But I think in the interim is what you're asking for, and we'll see what can be done for sure. Okay, so this slide here, in this one we're talking about what do we need for folks to submit for requesting a priority wheel or wheeling through priority request. I think the key thing is to know, one, the submission should be done in City for this interim manual process, and it should be done using a template with specific data that we're requesting. I'm going to share that and show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. But in general, the things we were looking for is what are the megawatts you need, the ties that you're coming in and go exporting out of, the duration, you know, in months, because this is a monthly process only. And then if it's for the contract, what's the underlying hours and days of the contract. And then we're giving folks an option if they would like to accept partial award, meaning partial in the megawatt amount or partial in the month and how many months they get versus the entire period they ask for or the entire amount they ask for. So that's an optional thing. You know, people can say, no, I want everything or nothing. Or they can say, yeah, I'm willing to accept proration on the megawatts or a partial duration of the award. And that would be done only if we don't have sufficient ACC left on a specific intertie. So if a specific intertie is over requested and the requests have equal priority, and that priority is based on the total number of hours in the request. So if we have more than one request with the same priority competing for insufficient amount of ATP on the intertie, then we would exercise such option if people elect to do so. And then the final thing is the attestation. So people who are submitting this request, they have to attest the accuracy of the information per the rules that we have here in the tariff. So in this, let me do this. Let me switch event producer. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and to give people a kind of a view of what we are talking about. So give me 1 second, and folks. All right. So let me share. First, let me share where we're posting all the data. So this is. Let me know if you can see the CAISO web page. I hope I'm not sharing something.
Yeah, we can see it. You're not sharing anything else. You're good.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Milos. Yeah, stop me if I share the wrong stuff at any point. This is CAISO.com. If you go to CAISO.com, under planning reliability requirements, so we posted a few things. The first thing here at the top of the template section, this is a template section. This is a wheel through priority request template. It's for folks who are requesting wheeling priorities, they have to make sure to download this template, fill it up completely, and then attach it to the city ticket where they're requesting, when they're submitting the request. I'm going to go over this template in a moment here. The other thing that is also useful for you to see is the due date. So under wheeling and resource adequacy imports aggregate data, hopefully before we go live, we're going to have hopefully better places for all of this information. We'll do a training to explain the whole, automate the whole. But for now,
there's a request, Abdul, if you can zoom in a little bit. It's a bit more difficult to see. Oh. And for folks on your own WebEx, there's a zoom button as well on each individual WebEx, so you can zoom in on your end of the screen as well.
All right, thank you. I zoomed in. Hopefully this is better. So again, this is the reliability requirements page under planning at CAISO.com. Under the template section, wheel through priority request template. This is a template to submit requests via city. And then under the wheeling and resource adequacy imports aggregate data, the first PDF file is the due date. So we posted all the due dates that folks can see, and I'm going to show you guys. And before I do that, this is where the ATC document, I think we put in the market notice. Hopefully you've seen it already, but if you haven't, all the ATC numbers that we shared here, they're all under this, they're under this Excel document. So if you click on the first thing, which is the due date, these are the due dates. Milos, am I showing due dates right now?
Yeah.
Okay. So these are the due dates. We will update those accordingly periodically. But for the first target period, which is what we're doing starting tomorrow, which is for June 2024 till January 2025. This is what we've been talking about. This is the first period that we're targeting for awarding, processing and awarding wheel-through priorities. For that period, the window will open up tomorrow, January 18th, and it will close January 31st. So this is your window to submit those requests. And then for the next periods, we have all the dates there. So if next month, when we process June to February, that window will shift accordingly, as you can see here. Probably a question you're asking is why are we starting June for the first half? The latter month, the last month keeps shifting, but the first month is static. The reason the first month is static is that's the month, June 1st is when this new process is taking effect. So we're going to start with June in the next few months until that 13-month rotating window, moves over to July. So in the June request window, that's when we're going to start taking requests for July till June the following year. The last month will keep rotating, will keep shifting as the 13-month window shifts, but the first month will remain static only for now as we start the implementation process, because the tariff effective date is June 1st with this new policy change. So these are the due dates. Let me now share the second. I'm going to share the template. So now the template that I mentioned, which is also under reliability requirements that you're going to use, is what I'm sharing right now. And Milos, if you can kindly one last time do one last thing there.
Yeah. If you wouldn't mind zooming in a little bit here as well.
You got it. Thank you, Milos. All right. So this is the template for submitting wheel-through priority requests. The first tab is instructions, kind of this background of what are we doing here and why we're doing it, and then here we're talking about the instructions. Make sure you submit this document. You attach it to the city ticket when you're submitting this request. And again, everything I'm talking about here today, this is for the interim manual process, which we will run this month, and then again in February, again in March. And then in April, the tools will go live, and the process will be completely through the tools that we're building through that user interface. In the tools, there will be market sim before that. There will be full training session for that process. So today's discussion is purely for the next 3 months as we're doing this manually. So this is some background information for you to know. This is the second tab is the admin info. Make sure you fill in the admin info. Pretty straightforward, kind of background information about the contact info, who's submitting this, so we can contact them if needed. And then in here, we need you to put in the contract information. So every wheel-through priority request has to be backed by a firm contract. That's what the tariff says. That's what the policy that we talked about. So you have to have a firm contract supporting it. And therefore, we're asking for the contract information. What we're going to use the contract information for is, one, to confirm that there is a contract, other than the attestation. There's an attestation and there's a contract information to check validate the contract data. And then what we're also going to do is we're going to use this contract information to validate your request. The wheel-through priority request will be, and it has to be, up to the contracted data information. So up to the period, up to the hours, up to the megawatts that are in the contract, limited to the contract information. What we're looking for here is, mainly, one, the contract name. And the contract name is basically, you pick the name you want that's relevant to your contract. It should be unique for each contract. It will help us identify the request that you're requesting for each contract, and it will help you also keep track of which contracts you submitted to the CAISO for this process. So put in the contract name, here put in your SCID, your scheduling coordinator ID, and then in these two, we're looking for the import intertie resource and the export intertie resource. These are master file resources. Today, those who are already submitting requests today as part of the interim process that is sunsetting at the end of May, they're familiar with these. You register these in master files and you use these import export resources to submit your wheel crew in the market. So for us to make sure that we can honor your request, and once we give you an award and we give you priority later in the market, we need this data from you so we can the market can honor those priorities. And then after that, supply product. The product is what kind of contract days and hours you have, and you could go with a standard product like 6x16. And in the last tab here, we have some other examples of what some of the standard products are. Or you can go you could elect to say, I have a flexible product that's not following the standard product. And in those cases, you know here it's flexible. So we gave you examples here. So you know it's flexible, and you tell us that the days and the hours for this flexible product. Make sure this data is clear so we know. And follow this example, please, so we know how to process your request. And then after that, we need the start period, end period of the contract. And the reason is, again, we're going to limit your request to this period. You should limit it to this period, but we're also going to do an extra layer of validation to make sure you're only requesting within your contract period, within your contract days and hours. Put in the information of the person submitting the request and attesting to the accuracy of the information. And then for each month, remember, this is a monthly process. The daily process will go live with the tools, and it will open up towards the end of May for the TRF timeline. So for now, it's only monthly processes. Therefore, it's on monthly segments. For each month, tell us how many megawatts you're looking for each of these contracts. Not looking for how many megawatts are per the contract. This tab is purely contract data. Now, after you fill in the contract data, go into the next tab, which is the request. We're calling it PWT, Priority Wheel Crew Request. In here, this is where you fill in the request information. So make sure, again, you fill in your SCID. And I'm hearing some echo, so I don't know if someone unmuted accidentally, but just reminding folks to mute if they have unmuted accidentally on the panel. So the SCID, again, fill it up. Contract name, it should match exactly the contract name from here. And then again, this supply product, flexible, whether it's flexible or standard product, and the hours, all of this information, it can be up to your contract information. So you could have less, a lower, request, but make sure you don't exceed your contract information. And again, here in the megawatts you're requesting, make sure you don't exceed your megawatts that you have in the contract. And this is what you're asking for. The period, which is the start and end date. And then these are probably the most questions about, which is what I talked about in the slide. If you would like us to prorate your megawatts, if there's insufficient ATC and there's equally competing requests that with a higher priority already took a chunk of the ATC, and there's not enough left on the ATC to honor the full megawatts that you're requesting, then say yes here for the pro rata column. This will tell us this person is, or this request, if there is insufficient, if we don't have 100 megawatts left, then we will prorate based on what's left. If you say no, then we're just going to go with, either in this case, no, it's for the 50. So if there's 50 left, you're going to get 50. If we don't have 50 left, then you're going to get nothing. So that's what this means. And then the partial month, it's the same thing where you're saying, okay, maybe Kaisha, you don't have ATC left for all the months, but some of the months that I requested, I am willing to take some of those months. That's fine. That's where a yes is correct. Now, if you don't want, if you want all months or nothing, then say no in this cell here. So hopefully I'll pause it then to make sure people have questions about any of what I just said. But this is what we mean by pro rata versus partial. I know there's a lot of information that we're asking for, but this will help us validate things correctly. It will help us, transfer the data later to the tools before we go live or when we go live. And it will help you get a preview of what the tools are going to ask you for. You're going to submit the same request in the tools, but it's going to be via the UI, the user interface that we're building. So hopefully it will be easier as we go live and the automation is ready. And then the final tab is attestation. This is, make sure you copy this information, you put it in the city ticket language, you fill in your name, title, department, company, and make so we know that you're attesting to the accuracy of the information per the tariff, section 23 of the tariff. So all the information you're reflecting is accurate. You do have a firm supply contract that you already signed, and you have an agreement there. And you can look at the tariff section for all the information you're attesting to. But in a nutshell, that's what we're looking for. So these are all the columns in the tabs. Let me pause and get questions on the website, where the data is, the dates, or this request template. So let me pause and take questions, and you guys will have to help me with the questions because I can't see the hands raised or any chat comments. So event producer, I don't know if anyone queued in the chat have a hand raised.
No, there's currently no questions. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. All right, stop sharing, then we'll go back to the slides. All right, so if we can, all right, I see the slides are up, perfect. All right, so back, if we can go to the next slide, please.
Can you give me back the presenting rights, or go to the next slide and maybe then do that?
Okay, yeah, sure thing.
I'm sorry, I thought I could move it and it wasn't letting me.
Oh, you said you can't move it?
Hi, event producer, can you give me presenting rights? Okay, so we should be on slide 26.
Perfect. All right, thank you. So, so we explained the window, the requesting process. After the window closes, we will process all the requests based on the priority, and we will send out. We'll notify the scheduling coordinators with the results and the awards that they got by close of business or end of day on February 5, which is 3 business days per our tariff. And then what we're going to do is, I think I talked about the request assessment. We're going to look at the total hours of each of those contracts, and that's how we're going to set the priority, and then do the competition based on the remaining ATC. Again, if you want partial award, partial in megawatts or partial in duration, let us know so we can prorate accordingly. Next slide, please. All right, few things good references to look at. We updated the BPM, the market operations BPM, with this new process that we started, and temporary language for the manual process. So you'll see what we're doing manually in the BPM and how we're doing it. And that manual language, we will overwrite with a future PRR when we get close to the tool go live date in April. Also, you'll see the ATC ID and TRM ID posted. I think we sent a market notice, or we're about to send it with the location of these documents. And then and then the last thing, like I said, in the liability requirements page, you'll see the request template, the window, and the dates are already posted on that page. Next slide, please. All right, that is all I have for the manual process. So let me pause one more time for questions, or if anyone wants to add anything to what I said. All right, back to you, Milos. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Abdul. Okay, so next steps. If we can go to the next slide. So just to piggyback on the prior substantive slide that Abdul had noted, we have posted a lot of that information. We posted the BPM, the ATC ID document, and the TRM ID document are posted. What's today? Today's 3 p.m. So the market notice should have gone out a bit earlier today, but those were posted this morning, just awaiting the market notice, and that should have gone out. And what those documents do, they reflect really some of the tariff language that talks about how we calculate the different components of the ATC. That's the ATC document. And then the TRM ID document focuses, as it implies, just the TRM components, and it goes a little bit more depth. I covered it orally in the discussion today, but the TRM ID document just explains the different components of the TRM that we covered today in a bit more detail, and what information we're using to develop those numbers. And then Abdul walk you through all the other postings. I know it's a lot of things that we published here in the last few days. We published the ATC ID document, the request submission template, the calendar of request windows for the rest of the calendar year, the ATC, the BPM, and now these ATC ID documents. They're in these. The links are in these slides. If you have trouble finding them, go back to the market notices, or feel free to reach out to us directly or to your customer service representative, and we'll be happy to provide you with that. But in terms of next steps, the window opens tomorrow, January 18th, and for the ATC that we've published already on that webpage for June 24th through January 25. We'll communicate the results as soon as the window closes. We're going to be processing that manually, all the requests. So the processing, if we don't get too many requests, I think that we can respond fairly quickly. But if we get a larger volume of requests, we probably will take the full 3 business days and lock ourselves up in a room to process all of these in time. But we'll get to it. We'll get it by the deadline. And then just for awareness, the February request window, as you're starting to plan things out, it's on the calendar, but the February request window will open February 18th through March 2nd. And that ATC window is June 24th through now February 25. As we finish the awards here from January by that February 5th deadline, soon thereafter, we're going to publish the values. We're going to update the ATC values, and we're going to publish them on that same location. We'll issue a market notice so you know in advance, after all the awards, what and the different updates to the ATC, what that ATC now is for June 24th through February 25, so it can support submission of your request in that window. I do want to reiterate here again, just lastly, again, thank you all for bearing with us and for your patience. We are doing this manually, and I know that we put a lot of things out there in these last presentations of the last week or so. So by all means, if you have trouble finding something, if you have questions about how to submit the request, anything at all related to the ATC that we posted, the request window and the submission of requests, if there is that June 18th to the 31st window, so you don't feel you have to submit the request right on the 18th. So feel free to play around with the information. Reach out to us if you have any questions. We're happy to engage and answer any questions and help you ultimately, answer any questions on the process. So use us as a resource. Reach out directly to us, or work through your stakeholder affairs, customer service representatives, and they'll ultimately come to us with questions. Let me pause here just before we adjourn and see if there are any remaining questions from folks. Okay, I don't see any. And again, thank you all for bearing with us. Thanks for sticking around for an afternoon call after already a busy morning with meetings. Reach out to us with any questions, but really appreciate all of your time, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.